Welcome back to day 7 of our Lenten Bible study on the Gospel of Mark. I hope you've been having a fantastic experience and the Gospel of Mark has been speaking to your lives. Before I begin, I'd like to make a small appeal. Not for me, but I'm in St. Anthony's Parish, Malvani, and we are building our church. We're building a new church. The old church has become too small for the size of our people here. Also, we've lost the parochial house where the priest was staying due to road widening, and therefore we have this need to build the parochial house and the church. And therefore I am making an appeal to you both spiritually and financially. If you cannot help us financially, it will be great that you can at least pray for us, and your prayers will go a long way to help us build the church. If you could help us financially, we'd be our parish and I and the parish team would be tremendously grateful to you. I am putting the details up on the screen. I will also put the details down in the description of the YouTube video. You can contact our parish office and they will be very glad to help you. Now, having put that behind us, let's get back to the gospel study on the Gospel of Mark. We are not doing Mark chapter 2, we are not beginning with that. But I want to explain the different characters in the Gospel of Mark because we will see them continuously come up. We also have a certain set understanding of them, like the Pharisees were evil and the Sadducees were evil, but that's not really the case. Okay, we shall see. Before we do that, I'd like to explain to you the map of Israel because that too is very important for us to understand. Okay, so let's look at the map. On your screen, you can see the map of Israel at the time of Jesus. This was around the first century AD. The area is divided into five major regions. Right on top, we have Galilee. You can see it highlighted. Below that, we have Samaria. Then we have Judea. And on the right hand side of the image, you have Decapolis and Perea. Now, these places will become important, especially as we go through the rulers where each one of them ruled, where each one of them had jurisdiction, or where do we find the Sadducees and the chief priest. And so, as we see in this map, we can see Jesus is at the moment in Galilee, and Jesus is moving at the moment in our gospel text around the Sea of Galilee. At the time of Jesus, it was Rome that ruled the world. And so, who will rule which area, who will govern which area was decided by Rome. When Jesus was born, Israel had a king, and that king was Herod. And we shall see how he became king. But what is also very important to note is that Rome was the one who gave power, and Rome had the one to take away the power. The three political authorities that we will see in the Gospel of John are Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, and Pontius Pilate. Let's begin with Herod the Great. Now, he was said to be a great orator, and so he went to the Senate in Rome and he convinced them why he should be made king of Judea. And being convinced, the Roman Senate decided to make Herod the king, and they gave him jurisdiction over all of Judea. So we see in the map over here, he had jurisdiction over Galilee, Samaria, Judea, Idumea. Though he was a client king, Rome really trusted him and gave him authority over all the area he ruled. Rome did not interfere during his rule. He had a powerful army, he had a lot of wealth, and he ruled with an iron fist. Now, Herod the Great was a great architect. The Jews had lost their first temple. There was no second temple. And this second temple was built by Herod. But you see, Herod was appointed by Rome and he had to please Rome. And so on the temple, he puts a big golden eagle. Now, that golden eagle was absolutely idolatry to the Jews. He was also greatly paranoid. Any rumor of a new king sounded like a death threat to him. And so he would brutally murder anyone who he thought would take his path. He killed his wives, he killed his sons, he killed his officials. In fact, now we see at the birth of Jesus why there is a slaughter of the innocents, because Herod is told that a new king has come and he's so afraid that he will absolutely go and slaughter anyone. And so he slaughters all children from the age of 1 to 3 because of this fear and this paranoia that someone will take his place. Herod died in 4 BC, and now Rome did not trust anyone with full authority and with full power. And so they did not appoint a new king. Rather, they split the kingdom. And now we see the rise of tetrarchs. And so the first tetrarch, or the first regional ruler, was Herod Antipas that we see in the text. Herod Antipas did not have full authority. In fact, he did not, he was compared to his father. He had very, very limited authority. He just had wealth because his father had wealth. And the area that he governed was Galilee and Perea. He was not a king, just the mid level administrator answering directly to Rome. And we see that Jesus encounters him in his ministry. In fact, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus calls him the fox. He is also the one who beheaded John the Baptist. He becomes important to our study because he ruled during the time of Jesus' ministry. The next person we have is Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was a Roman governor. He was not Jewish. And Pontius Pilate was given great authority by Rome. He had military authority. He could choose to execute people. The tetrarchs could not choose. Herod Antipas could not execute anyone. And therefore, we see Jesus is taken to Pontius Pilate so that he may be crucified. He governed only the area of Judea in which Jerusalem is in Judea, the religious center. And so these are the three political authorities that we will see. A very quick recap. Herod the Great was a king. He had maximum authority and he was trusted totally by Rome. And so his area of governing was all of Judea. Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, he was a tetrarch and had very limited authority. The source of his power was basically his inheritance because he had a lot of wealth and he governed the region of Galilee and Perea. Pontius Pilate was the governor, he had military authority, and the source of his power was that he was appointed by Rome. He governed the region of Judea, in which was the city Jerusalem, which was the temple and therefore the center. Okay, let's go to the next set. The next set of people are the religious influencers. We begin with the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees were lay people, they were not priests, they were lay interpreters of the law. They were the ones who made sure that the law is practiced and the faith is kept. And so their role was to bring the holiness home. They were based in synagogues, homes, and villages. Now, the Pharisees became very important during the Babylonian exile because that time they had no temple, no priest, no sacrifice. And it was the Pharisees who kept the Jewish faith alive. They were the ones who taught the faith, who promulgated the faith. They were the ones who made sure that people practiced the Jewish customs even when they were in exile. And so they were teachers. Their mission was to adapt God's law to the daily life, to everything that they did in their daily work, ensuring that the covenant could be lived out everywhere, from their workplace to the kitchen and the temple. And so, an easy way to remember them is they are those people who brought the law into the villages, into the towns, into the homes of people, into the marketplaces, who brought God's word there and tried to keep it alive. Okay, the next set of people are the scribes. Now, the scribes are the architects of the law. They were the ones who professionally wrote. See, today we have printing press, we have WhatsApp, we have the computer. It's just easy for us to type and to keep records. But back then, people had to literally write. And the scribes were the ones who wrote. And so their role was they were professional scholars and legal experts. They were educated. And they traced their roots back to Ezra in the 5th century BC when they began to write down the Jewish Torah. And so the scribes were one who had greatly studied and they were experts. Anyone wanted to know what the law says or how to interpret the law, they would call upon the scribes because the scribes had written, studied, and made notes. Because without them, the texts would not have been passed down. In fact, the scriptures would have disappeared if not for their work. Because of their knowledge, they come in conflict with Jesus. They are unable to see what Jesus is trying to teach them, possibly also because they are scholars of the law and Jesus is merely a carpenter. But the good way to remember the scribes are those who are experts in the law. They are the ones who have passed down the law from generation to generation. They are the ones who have preserved the text. They are legal scholars of the law. Next, we come to the Sadducees. The Sadducees were simply the guardians of the temple. They were the priestly elite based in Jerusalem. And for them, it was extremely important that the temple survived, that the temple was not destroyed, because if the temple was destroyed, they would have been out of their jobs. And so they were always hand in hand with the Romans. They tried to keep the law, they tried to keep peace so that there would be no destruction in Rome. They were the ones who viewed political stability as essential to the survival of the Jewish faith. Their influence was immense, but it was fragile because they were worried that if the temple is destroyed, they will cease to exist. A good way to remember them is they were temple elites who had great interest in preserving peace between Jerusalem and Rome so that the temple would not be destroyed. What's amazing also to see is what happened to them after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. We see that the Sadducees no longer existed. They vanished because their power was based upon the temple. The scribes, they endured, they persevered, and they preserved the text. And the Pharisees, they didn't just survive, they thrived because faith had now moved from the temple to the institutions. As I said earlier, I will keep the images on the screen for a longer time. You will see less of me and more of the images. That is because I don't have the time to explain everything, and so you could pause the video and read what is on the text. Okay, the next person is the chief priest. Now, the chief priests were the administrators of temple worship. They were senior members of the priestly class. They served as an operational bridge between the Jewish people and the Roman occupiers. Whenever the Rome had to communicate something, they would communicate it through the chief priest. Now, also important to note that these chief priests were appointed by Rome. Because they were appointed by Rome, of course, they bribed their way through. And then you would also see that the temple was now run as a place where people could make money. Of course, if you bribed your way through, you need to recover the money that you've used to bribe. And so the temple place was no longer holy and sacred. It became a marketplace. And we see the reason why Jesus is angry. They had the burden of administration. They were in charge of the liturgy, they were in charge of the temple economy, and they were also in charge of diplomacy. They tried to manage holy things in an unholy political world. And that's a good way to remember them, that they tried to manage holy things in an unholy political world. The next set of people that we have are the elders. I know my picture in this looks like Gandalf the Grey. The elders were just elders. They were not any religious sect, but their authority was rooted not in the office, but in age and in wisdom. Now, the responsibilities were that of local governance. They were the ones who represented the people's voice. And finally, they provided stability and continuity. They preserved the traditions and the collective memory of the nation. Next, we have the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin functioned as the highest religious and judicial body in Jewish society. It combined the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. The authority of the Sanhedrin is found in Numbers chapter 11, where Moses finds it too burdensome to govern Israel and to judge them. And therefore, he goes to God and prays and says, God, I need help. And God says, appoint 72 others and they will help you to govern. And therefore, the Sanhedrin has its roots in Numbers chapter 11. The final person that we will see is the chief priest. He stood at the intersection between heaven and the empire or the kingdom of Judah. He stood at an intersection between God and the people. Notice what the high priest did. The high priest was the one who represented the people to God. The prophet was the one who represented God to the people. And therefore, the high priest, his role is to present God is to represent the people to God. Now, Jesus is the high priest. And so, what Jesus also does is Jesus represents the people to God. And therefore, on the day of Yom Kippur, he was the only one permitted to enter into the Holy of Holies. He would go there and he would offer sacrifice on behalf of Israel. If the high priest was acceptable to the Father, then the people of Israel were acceptable to the Father. However, if the high priest died inside in the Holy of Holies, which meant the high priest had lived an unholy life, he was unacceptable to God, which also meant that Israel was unacceptable to God. And so we see when Jesus is our high priest, we are acceptable to God because the sacrifice of Jesus is acceptable to God. We are blessed not because we are good, but we are blessed because Jesus is good. We are blessed not because we can offer great things to God, but we are blessed because Jesus offered the greatest gift that could have ever been offered. And because Jesus offered that gift, it is we who are blessed through the gift of Jesus. The best way to remember the high priest is that he is the supreme representative. He is the only person permitted to enter the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement, and it is his sacrifice that is pleasing or unpleasing to God. With this, we come to the end of day 7. I hope you've got a great gist of who the people are. You can go back, you can pause, and you can try and re-look at who these people are, because they will continuously come up from now on in the Gospel of Mark. Tomorrow we shall see Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 17. Okay, Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 17. Until we see you tomorrow, God bless. Take care. Pray for me, and I will be praying for you.